everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're gonna talk about food labeling and what you should know before shipping to another country food products. Before we go ahead, remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed the video because this is gonna help us grow, and you make sure to receive always updates regarding next videos that we publish. Moving forward with the topic, today we're gonna talk about food labeling and what you should know before actually importing food products to other countries, because in general, the labels are the ones that are generally always checked. And you may get fined for having the wrong labels or wrong information showing the labels, or if it's not complete. So we don't really talk about information being wrong or not, because that's something different. It's more like it needs to be complete. It needs to contain all the minimum information as per regulation. Remember that in the last video we talked about food-specific requirements and country-specific requirements. Food-specific requirements and country-specific requirements, they both apply to labeling. So regarding the labels, we don't really have food specific that much, but we may have, which means that there are always a regulation around the label of the food, like the food labeling for each country in each country. So it's like a country-based requirement. But it's also true that there are some specifications that you should mark on the label on the food product, on the label of the product based on the type of product, which means that if there are general information required for that country when it comes to food that you should show on the label, there are also some little details, additional details that you should add based on the type of product. So remember, general rule apply as per country regulation, but also there are food specific requirements, like what you should show in the food label, on the food label, okay? So some of them are best before dates. Like best before date is not always mandatory for certain countries, but it's something very common, right? You always have the expiration date and you have the best before date, which are two different things. So expiration date, you should always mention it. Best before date is something that you may need to do, or something that's really up to you. It really depends on the country, so be careful. But keep in mind that when it comes to dates, there's the best before date, there's expiration dates, there are other dates they should include on the shipping label, not the shipping label, in the food label. Generally you have the nutrition facts table, you have the country of origin, the ingredient list, nutrition claims, and so on. So there are a lot of things mentioned at the back of the product generally. And of course, the food label is one of the most important things to have and to get it right. Why? Because consumers base their choices on what you write on that label, okay? So if you want them to make informative decisions, like they know what they're buying, you should make it clear. Of course, there are companies that try to make things a little bit more ambiguous, hard to say, because they don't want to show they want the consumers to buy their products. They don't want them to don't buy it because of this information shown on the label. So, and of course, some companies, they just try to stick to the very let's say, and some companies, they just stick to the rules. They don't just go over. Of course, they don't overdo, but of course you need to keep in mind that it's also a branding thing, right? So if you mislead the consumer, then sooner or later they will find out, and then you have all those scandalous things on Instagram Reels or TikTok. Nowadays you pretty much can't hide anymore. There's always going to be someone that it's very that really knows about certain things, and they can just do bad publicity somehow, like a very bad advertisement. So yeah, in general, the dates, you should understand first of all the dates, like how you should show which type of dates and how you should show those dates to the consumers, because it needs to be very straightforward for them to understand what is the expiration date and so on. So date basically one of the most important things to understand when it comes to labeling is the dates that you should show. As I said, it could be best before dates, expiry date, or only expiry date, and so on. Then another mandatory requirement generally is the country of origin. Now, for certain products, it is. Remember, there are food-specific requirements and country-specific requirements. Country of origin is something that it's food-specific requirements, which means for certain foods, you must include the country of origin for your product. There are also companies that just always show it because they're proud. There's something to be proud of, and kind of advertise and makes the brand stronger, so they actually include it. But it's not always mandatory for certain product. That related to products, okay? Food specific requirements generally. Then another one is the allergen label, like all the details about allergens, and it's something that you must have. You know, when you read, for example, tobacco products, something like it may contain peanuts or something like that, is because you need to warn the consumer that there may be other stuff in it accidentally dropped in the food because of maybe the shared production lines, I don't know, whatever. So you actually should always mention the allergen, let's say the allergens basically. So what are the most important points to remember when it comes to food labeling? First of all, nutrition facts. Second, list of ingredients. Third, the gluten sources. Fourth, the allergens. Fifth, the country of origin. Where is the product coming from? 6, date marking. 7, the composition claim, like what are the products made for? It may be 8, method of production. 9th, nutrition facts. Now, when it comes to nutrition facts, right, there's always like some basic stuff that you should mention. So there are plenty of rules, as I said, but just to keep in mind, the nutrition facts always have a minimum, like, like the list of things that you should mention, and some are like, they could be like 12, 13, something like that. It's like saturated fat, sugars, carbohydrates, trans fat, and so on. So anything that you generally see when you look at products and food products at the back, it's always the same list pretty much. Sometimes it may differ from country to country, but you always have the saturated fat, you always have the fat, the trans fat, the sugars, sodium, and stuff like that. And generally there's also like the percentage of daily values that you have, except for certain components, but you also have the percentage of daily value to show. And it's not only that, you should use the exact names that they ask you to use, which means, you know, you need to think about consumers, right? Consumers don't really know sometimes like the very technical names. They go by common names like trans fat, saturated fat, sugars. So you should always use those specific names. Like you can't use a different one, okay? There are regulations behind it as well, like what literally the names that you should use when it comes to the nutrient table, right? So like again, like sugars, like you should always use the same, so that any consumer always goes and it will, every time it will go and read the nutrient table, they will understand, because it's a common pattern for all the food products. So in general, you know, when it comes to allergens as well, for example, they should use always the same statement, like may contain peanuts, may contain blah blah blah. So there's always a statement, and that's also something that it's generally mentioned in a specific way, like you should use this line and then add the allergen, like for example may contain and then write what. And generally, again, when it comes to food labeling for dates, there's generally the best before date and the expiration date. Expiration date means not good anymore, after this date you shouldn't use it, and there's the best before date, which means if the product is unopened, that's the date where it will still be good and fresh, and you know, would have probably a better taste than when it expires basically. So generally there's always like the same writing, right? Like there's best before date, packed on, expiry date, but it's also like freeze on, manufacture on, prepared on. So there may be other like lines as well, but just make sure that you check if you can actually use that wording. And overall, as you may understand, they play labeling and package itself, like how you design it, they play a crucial role in, let's say, the customer experience, but also like in their awareness. Like choose your product over another. It's also a matter of food labeling, like how they can understand like the product has X amount of, I don't know, vitamins and stuff like that. You should make sure that there's enough information. First of all, you comply with the law and the requirements, and second, you want to make it appealing for your customer. So you should make sure that you understand those guidelines and requirements, and also just make sure that it's user friendly as well. There are always, as we said, the guidelines and the requirements and mandatory writings that you should follow, but it's also up to you. Some companies, they do claim voluntary certain aspects on the food labeling, so you could do the same. There's no limitation on what you can show eventually. You still need to be able to meet the basic requirements, and then the rest, there are a lot of optional stuff that you can add, and no one is going to tell you anything. I hope this was helpful. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment, but also remember to subscribe to the channel, because this is going to help us grow, and make sure that you actually get the alert for our next video, and keep yourself informed. See you in the next one.